Hey, welcome back. I'm Dr. Brooke Scheller, and I want to know, have you ever told yourself that you were going to skip the glass of wine tonight, you were going to eat a healthy dinner, go to bed early, and somehow by 6 or 7 p.m. you're pouring a drink and reaching for chips that you don't even want? This isn't a willpower failure, this is biology. And specifically, one way to look at it is a three-way conversation between your brain, your gut, and the food you've been eating all day. So today we're talking about dopamine, digestion, and our decisions, and why understanding how these three interact might be the most important thing that you can do if you're trying to change what you eat, how you drink, or even just feel more in control of your choices. And yes, this means that what we eat influences our choices we make in our day and maybe in our entire life. So listen up. Now let's start with dopamine. Dopamine is one of our brain's most popular neurotransmitters or chemical messengers. And sometimes dopamine is referred to as the pleasure chemical or the reward chemical. But what I find to be most interesting is that it's also known as the anticipation chemical. It surges before you get the reward, not just during it. It's what makes you reach for the wine before you even taste the wine. And it's what makes your hand go to your phone even when you know there's not really anything that interesting on it. Now, I always reference the book Dopamine Nation by Anna Lembke. And I love when she introduces this concept that even the thought of a drink actually increases our dopamine. This is why the idea of happy hour often gets us through the last few hours at work. It gives us that motivation and drive to get through it. Now, dopamine is essentially your brain's motivation and decision-making currency. It signals that thing over there, that's worth going for. And the more dopamine that gets released, think things like sugar and alcohol and ultra-processed food, the more your brain encodes it as a high priority target. So if it's something that's going to give you lots of dopamine, it's going to give you a lot of motivation to go and get it. I also really like how in Dopamine Nation, Dr. Lembke talks about it as a system, like a point system. Now, we might not get a lot of dopamine points from things like nature. Maybe we get 10 dopamine points from nature. But substances like alcohol or cocaine give us 150 dopamine points. So when we're so used to getting those high reward dopamine targets, it makes those things like sitting in nature not feel as good. That's what keeps us going toward those high priority targets. And here's where it gets really relevant to what we eat and drink. Now, when your dopamine system is dysregulated, either chronically low or constantly spiking, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term decision-making, loses influence. This is where the primitive and reward-seeking part of your brain starts to take over. So this is why someone who's been drinking regularly for years doesn't just decide to stop drinking. Their dopamine system has literally reorganized around alcohol as the primary reward signal. Now, the same is true for sugar and ultra-processed foods. These too will give us spikes of dopamine. These substances can actually hijack the exact pathway our brain uses to make choices about what's good for us. But here's what I want you to hold on to. Dopamine is not fixed. It's actually dynamic. It responds to what we eat, how we eat, when we eat, how we sleep, how we move, and this is key, what's happening in the gut. Now, while most people think of dopamine as purely a brain chemical, research shows that a significant portion of dopamine is actually produced in our gut. We also need many nutrients like the amino acid tyrosine and several other vitamins and minerals like vitamin B6, magnesium, iron, and some others. Now, we get tyrosine from protein, so think eating more chicken, eggs, lentils, pumpkin seeds, and without eating enough dietary protein, our brain and our gut both struggle to make the dopamine that we need to feel motivated and make good decisions. But it goes deeper than this, and it goes into what we call the gut microbiome. This is the trillions of bacteria that are living inside of your digestive tract, and they play a role in dopamine production and signaling. Now, certain strains of bacteria can actually help convert some of these dietary precursors into dopamine and how our dopamine receptors function in the brain via what we call the gut-brain axis. And you've probably heard me talk about the gut-brain axis before because I absolutely love this topic and how important it is to recognize the signals that are being sent between the two. And if you're low in dopamine, your gut is going to be sending you signals. And if your gut is inflamed from things like stress or alcohol, a high sugar diet, or lots of ultra processed foods, a few different things can happen. Number one, our microbial diversity can drop. Bacteria that supports healthy dopamine metabolism are crowded out by bacteria that thrive in more of an inflamed environment. And if we also think about alcohol and how alcohol is actually used in hand sanitizer to kill bacteria, alcohol itself is highly disruptive to the microbiome and influencing that microbial diversity. Number two, intestinal permeability increases. Now, we often call this leaky gut, and this allows inflammatory compounds to enter the bloodstream, cross the blood-brain barrier where they can directly disrupt dopamine signaling. And number three, our vagus nerve gets dysregulated. This nerve is the superhighway between your gut and your brain. So when your gut is inflamed, the signals it sends up the vagus nerve shift things like our mood, our motivation, and yes, cravings. So this is why someone who eats a highly processed diet doesn't just feel physically sluggish. They often feel mentally foggy, unmotivated, and maybe prone to making decisions that they later regret. This isn't just your mood or some type of character flaw. This is a compromised gut-brain barrier. So now let's bring it all together: dopamine, digestion, and our decisions. When your gut health is poor, dopamine production and signaling become dysregulated. When dopamine is dysregulated, your brain's decision-making center loses its edge. And when decision-making is compromised, you're more likely to reach for a quick hit reward. That is the glass of wine, the handful of chips, the comfort meal that you absolutely love after a stressful day. This can further damage the gut, drive more inflammation, and perpetuates the cycle. And this is the loop that I see constantly in my practice. And it's why telling people to just make better choices or just choose better without addressing the biochemistry is never enough. So what actually helps? First, I recommend prioritizing protein at every single meal. Now, dopamine synthesis begins with tyrosine, and all of our brain's neurotransmitters, including serotonin and GABA, all rely on amino acids from protein. So you want to aim to have protein every single meal, including breakfast, making sure to have something like eggs or Greek yogurt, or one of my favorites, a protein smoothie. And this sets the neurochemical tone for your decision-making all day long. You also want to focus on feeding your microbiome. Eating a wide variety of vegetables, beans, legumes, fermented foods. Research consistently shows that greater dietary diversity correlates with greater microbial diversity. So if we want to ramp up that diversity, we want to have a lot of different foods in our diet. This also supports dopamine metabolism. So some say to aim for 30 different plants per week, which may seem like a lot, but if you're counting things like beans and grains, all of your fruits and veggies, you can easily hit that target if you work toward it. You also want to remove gut disruptors. Now, alcohol is one of the most potent disruptors of our gut barrier and our microbiome composition. Refined sugar and processed foods follow pretty closely next. If you're serious about resetting cravings, the gut has to come first. So when we're thinking about changing habits and behaviors, tying our habits back to things like alcohol being bad for our gut might be something that also helps motivate us. And you also want to think about stabilizing your blood sugar. Blood sugar crashes trigger dopamine-seeking behavior. And when glucose drops, we've talked about this before, your brain sounds the alarm for the fastest reward possible. That might be sugar, that might be carbohydrates, that could also be alcohol. So pairing carbohydrates with protein or fat or fiber can slow the absorption and help keep dopamine regulation steady. It's going to help keep you from feeling like you have to grab that thing, the alcohol, or the snacks. Now, the reason I built my entire practice around food and alcohol is because I have seen over and over again that what you eat is not separate from what you drink, how much you drink, or whether you can stay the course when you decide to make a change. These are all biologically connected at the level of our microbiome, our neurotransmitters, and our gut-brain axis. And the good news is this: the gut is remarkably responsive. Research shows that measurable changes in the microbiome happen within just a few days of dietary shifts, and dopamine receptor sensitivity can begin to reset within just a couple of weeks. If you want structured support doing exactly this, resetting the biology behind your cravings, I want to tell you about how to do this to reset your habits. The plan with Dr. Brooke is a small group program designed for women who are done with white-knuckling their choices and who want to work with their biology instead of against it. We go deep on gut health, dopamine regulation, blood sugar stability, and the nutritional foundations that make lasting change possible. This is a group program that is intimate and small by design. And if that sounds like something you've been looking for, the link is in the description below. I'd love to have you in our next group. And if this video was helpful, please share it with someone who needs to hear that their cravings are not a willpower problem, they're a biology problem. The good news is that biology can be fixed. I'll see you in the next video.